So imagine you're trapped inside this small locked security cage in a department store.
Oh man, just the thought of that makes me anxious.
Right. I mean, you are crouched on this freezing cold floor, and your heart is pounding so hard it actually aches against your ribs, and outside the thick glass storefront, there is this crazed, bloodthirsty mob just tearing people apart.
Literally tearing them apart.
Exactly. And the power overhead is flickering. The security monitors in front of you have turned to this blinding, hissing white static, and you are forced to watch, completely helpless, as this doomed teenage couple makes a fatal mistake right in front of your eyes. You can't look away, and the thing hunting them is now staring right at you.
It's terrifying. It completely strips away every illusion of safety you have in modern society. I mean, you are put right on the absolute bleeding edge of panic, confined to a space barely large enough to stand in, while the entire world ends just on the other side of a pane of glass.
That pure, unadulterated tension is exactly our focal point today. Welcome to our deep dive. Today we are exploring the dark fantasy epic San Vitae, The Awakening by D.P. Kirk.
Such a massive, intricate book.
It really is. And our mission today is to provide you with a reader's guide and a deep analytical look at a really pivotal section of the book, which is chapter 24, titled No Way Out.
A very fitting title, honestly.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
But to fully appreciate the sheer terror of this chapter, we first need to unpack the complex and honestly often brutal world of the book. We are going to walk step by step through the biological and magical mechanics at play inside that department store.
Right, and analyze how this intense, genre-bending novel uses trauma to basically build its entire universe.
So we find ourselves thrust into this department store during the collapse of Tokyo. But, the narrative structure framing this event is what really makes it so unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't just a standard flashback chapter where a character sits around a campfire telling a spooky story about the past.
No, it's way more visceral than that.
It is. The author uses this mechanism called shared memory. So chapter 24 is actually experienced in real time from the perspective of a woman named Lotus, but it's being accessed by characters in the present timeline.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism because the world of San Vitae relies so heavily on these physiological connections. In the present timeline of the book, we're dealing with this post-apocalyptic wasteland ruled by these complex, ruthless factions.
Very ruthless. It's a society rebuilt on a precarious, predatory hierarchy based entirely on blood.
Right, so at the bottom you have the Sans. These are just ordinary baseline humans, but above them are the San.
And the San are the ones who possess Vitae. Right.
Exactly. It's essentially a biological blood magic that grants them immense power. The San govern the Sans, running what is, honestly, effectively a global protection racket.
Yeah, they offer the baseline humans, walled cities, and safety, but in exchange, the Sans have to act as a donor class.
It's super dark.
The societal tension is built directly into their biology, but then, the hierarchy gets violently disrupted by the existence of Sanites.
The anomalies.
Right. These are incredibly rare variants whose vitae is so concentrated that it completely breaks the established rules of the magic system. And our main protagonist, Kurien, is a Sanite.
And his existence is such a massive threat to the ruling San class that he was locked in an Inquisitor's vault.
Subjected to horrific systematic torture for 12 years.
Yeah, they weren't just punishing, they were trying to drain and study his anomalous blood.
But he finally escapes and is navigating this wasteland with his newly bonded partner, Sharina.
Which brings us back to Lotus, knowing that grim reality makes the shared memory concept so much heavier. Lotus, the woman whose perspective we are forced into during chapter 24, is deeply connected to Kurien's past.
And to his former Covenness Myasuchi.
Right. So when characters in this book engage in a shared memory, it's not just like putting on a magical VR headset where you observe an event like a movie.
Oh, not at all. The text describes it as plugging your nervous system directly into the memory holder's brain.
Yes. If Lotus felt her lungs burning from sprinting away from a mob, the person viewing the memory in the present actually feels their own chest seizing up.
They experience her adrenaline spikes, her terror, her physical pain. It's entirely immersive.
Framing the lore this way completely changes how you interact with the history of the world. D.P. Kirk takes these sweeping high fantasy concepts like immortal beings and blood magic and forces them through this incredibly narrow, gritty lens of intimate human trauma.
Which is brilliant. We aren't reading a dry history textbook about the fall of Tokyo and the initial outbreak of the affliction.
Right, we are experiencing the raw, suffocating panic of the world's collapse through the nervous system of a baseline human who has zero magic to protect herself.
You are literally shoved into a locked room to watch the danger break through the windows.
So let's get into the terrifying mechanics of what actually happens inside that cage. Welcome to No Way Out.
The tension here is just masterful.
The sequence starts with Lotus and her friend Kiki fleeing a mob of the afflicted. And the book makes it very clear early on that these are not the slow, shuffling zombies we are used to in pop culture.
No, these are crazed, hyper-violent beings.
The biological mechanism of the affliction is fascinating, honestly. It overrides the host's nervous system entirely.
Right, because the Vitae virus circulating in their blood essentially turns off their pain receptors. It pushes their muscular output to 100%.
Which means the afflicted completely ignore their own mangled flesh.
Yeah, when they break through the store's thick glass storefront, they don't hesitate or flinch when the shards slice them open to the bone.
Their bodies are literally destroying themselves through sheer exertion. And Lotus and Kiki only survived that initial surge by managing to lock themselves inside a heavy security cage.
Leaving them physically safe for the moment, but entirely cornered.
And from the floor of that cage, they're forced to watch the chaos unfold on the store's security monitors.
This is where it gets really heartbreaking.
Yeah, this sets up the tragic subplot of the chapter. Through the screens, they see these two teenagers fleeing the mob. You've got this muscular, baseball-built teen named Hako and his girlfriend, April.
They are running so desperately, but April gets caught.
She gets dragged down by one of the creatures right in front of the camera. Hako is completely shattered. In his devastation, he runs toward the security cage where Lotus and Kiki are hiding.
Because he happens to have a set of keys.
Right, and he frantically tries to unlock the cage to get inside.
But his hands are shaking so badly he fumbles the keys. And, the environmental shift at this exact moment is what really escalates the tension.
The main power grid in Tokyo starts failing.
Yes, the overhead lights in the store die, and when the emergency backup system kicks in, it utilizes this eerie, intermittent red strobe light.
The strobe light. In those flashing bursts of red, the situation goes from tragic to purely horrific.
April is no longer the terrified girlfriend screaming for help.
No, the affliction has already taken hold of her nervous system. She is now zombified, and she is dragging Hako's corpse toward the security cage.
Smacking her lips, literally licking his blood off her face in the strobe light.
It's so gross and so scary.
Yeah.
And while this nightmare is inching closer, Lotus is desperately trying to pick the lock of the security cage from the inside.
She broke off a thin piece of metal from a freight pallet, right?
Yeah, and she's trying to manipulate the tumblers. It's a literal race against time. The lock is stubborn, the red lights are flashing, and this infected girl is dragging her dead boyfriend closer and closer.
It's the only barrier keeping Lotus and Kiki alive.
And just as Lotus manages to pop the lock, April lunges.
Kiki reacts in a split second. She shoves the infected girl back just far enough so the cage door slams shut.
And then the two women are forced to escape upward, climbing into this narrow, claustrophobic ceiling ventilation duct to get away from the growing mob.
It's relentless.
It really is. Now, I'll be completely honest here. When I first read the setup for Hako and April, I groaned a bit.
Really? Why is that?
Well, the doomed teen couple fumbling keys while the monster approaches it felt like a B-movie horror cliché. I mean, we've seen the boyfriend try to save the girlfriend and fail 100 times. I was ready to write the scene off as filler.
I totally get that skepticism. On the surface, it maps perfectly onto familiar zombie tropes.
Exactly.
But if you look closely at the mechanism of why he fumbles the keys, D.P. Kirk completely subverts it. Hako doesn't just drop the keys because his hands are sweaty from fear.
Right, he actually succeeds in unlocking the door.
Yes. But he opens it to his dead girlfriend. The text specifically notes that the zombified April moans his name, Hako, with this unnatural, yearning tone.
Oh, that gave me chills.
The affliction virus isn't just making her a mindless eating machine. It actively hijacks her vocal cords to trigger a mammalian caretaking response in her prey.
It literally weaponizes human empathy. That is so incredibly dark.
He hears her say his name, and for a split second, his brain overrides logic. He thinks he can still save her.
That hesitation, that desperate hope, is the biological exploit the virus uses to get him killed.
It takes a familiar horror trope and injects it with a deeply psychological cruelty.
And the author engages all of your senses to heighten that psychological cruelty. The visual horror is obvious with the strobes and the blood, but Kirk focuses so heavily on the auditory and olfactory elements too.
Oh, the sound design of this scene, so to speak, is incredible. The harsh white noise, static blaring from the security monitors audibly isolates the women in the cage.
And then there's the smell. The text describes the pungent, suffocating odor of urine and fresh death filling the small room.
The sensory details ground the fantastical elements of a blood magic apocalypse in a physical, nauseating reality. You can practically feel the cold metal of the cage against your back.
So let's look at how this sequence elevates the broader narrative of San Vitae, because this isn't just an isolated scary scene included for shock value.
No, it serves a huge structural purpose.
Throughout much of the book, we spend time in sweeping, epic settings, exploring ruined cities, towering spires, massive inquisitor vaults.
The scale is huge.
But in chapter 24, the narrative space sharply contracts. The author takes this grand epic about the fall of civilization and shrinks the focus down to a single locked cage.
The contrast between the macro and the micro demonstrates an intense focus on pacing.
Yeah, you have the macro-level apocalypse happening outside, millions of people dying as Tokyo falls to pieces. And yet, all of your attention as a reader is forced onto the micro-level tension inside.
The fate of the world suddenly doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the mechanical click of a tumbler in a lock.
It forces you to zoom in on the human cost of the lore. And in that zoomed-in space, the characterization really shines.
Despite the unimaginable terror, we see the resilience of these two women.
I love when Kiki, who is covered in dirt, her dress completely torn, surrounded by death, manages to joke that her ruined outfit is fashion-forward.
It's such a great human moment, and more importantly, she refers to Lotus using the nickname Dear Flower.
Dear Flower, yeah.
Yeah.
That simple nickname, amidst all the blood and static, is doing heavy lifting for the entire novel's thematic resonance.
It shows a deep, resilient bond. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reframes how we view the political landscape in the present day.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Because when Kurien is navigating the wasteland later, he deals constantly with the Santerrie.
The Santerrie are the rigid, highly militarized human faction, right? The ones who operate with extreme prejudice and authoritarian rules.
Exactly. And to expand on that a bit, the Santerrie are the descendants of the baseline humans who survived this initial outbreak.
Okay, that makes sense.
So as a reader, you might initially judge their harsh, draconian society in the present day as needlessly cruel.
Sure, they seem like standard dystopian bad guys at first.
But Chapter 24 provides the historical context. The sheer, unadulterated trauma that the Sands experienced during this collapse justifies their modern paranoia.
You understand why the ruling class is so authoritarian, because you've seen what happens when the rules fail.
You've watched the afflicted tear through glass and weaponize love.
It answers the fundamental question of why is the world like this through terrifying action rather than just, boring exposition.
You aren't given a history lesson about the founding of the Santerrie. You are made to feel the generational trauma that shaped their society.
So when Kurien encounters their prejudice later, you remember the locked cage. You remember the smell of fresh death.
The lore feels earned because you survived its origin.
Which brings us to the broader sci-fi elements of the world building. Because merging disparate genres is notoriously difficult.
Very difficult.
But Kirk takes the vampiric arcane mythology of the Vitae and weaves it into hard cyberpunk. You have concepts like Vitae technology and particle emulsions driving the present-day cities.
It's a really unique blend.
I found myself getting a bit lost in the mechanics of the Vitae technology early on, though. It sounds incredibly sci-fi, but how does it actually function in a world based on blood magic?
Well, Vitae is essentially the industrialization of magic.
Industrialized magic.
Yeah. The ruling factions figured out how to extract the arcane, living properties from the Vitae blood and suspend those properties in chemical liquids, which are the particle emulsions.
Wow.
They are taking raw biological magic and turning it into a stable mechanical fuel source to power their cyberpunk cities, their weaponry, their infrastructure.
It's dead Vitae.
Exactly. Dead Vitae.
That makes the societal structure even more horrifying. If the baseline sands are the donors and the sanites are the anomalies, the entire technological grid of this post-apocalyptic world is running on the industrialized harvesting of human life.
It's incredibly bleak. The magic isn't just casting spells, it's the literal fuel of industry.
And that ties directly into the book's major themes of bodily autonomy, right?
Oh, absolutely. The book constantly questions who has the right to control your life, your blood, and your memories.
Because there are no simple heroes or villains here. Every character is a victim of this industrialized system in some way.
Take Kurien. He isn't just fighting external political enemies. He is literally battling an inner demon.
A separate, malicious consciousness that tries to seize control of his nervous system and pilot his body.
Right. And his bonded partner, Sharina, is fighting through her own severe psychological trauma to prove her loyalty.
Just trying to find some semblance of autonomy in a world that views her as a resource.
Even the leaders of the oppressive factions, like the Covenness Myasuchi, are presented as complex figures.
Yeah, she is a leader completely broken by the impossible choices she had to make to ensure the survival of her people.
Every decision she made for the greater good carries a heavy, lingering cost. And the author visually represents this psychological burden through the magic system.
This is one of my favorite parts of the book.
Trauma in San Vitae isn't just a bad memory you try to ignore. It manifests physically in the mental space.
Through the Black Lotus avatar.
Yes. When characters access the shared memory space or delve into their own psyches, their emotional pain and unresolved trauma take the literal magical manifestation of this Black Lotus.
They have to actively interact with, and sometimes fight, the physical embodiment of their own suffering.
The magic is inextricably tied to their survival and their psychological scars.
It's like a psychological layered cake. You come for the action-packed sci-fi and fantasy frosting, but you stay for the dense, emotional thriller baked inside.
I love that analogy. Reading this book requires an investment in the characters' psyches because the world building is driven by their pain.
And as you navigate this universe, the narrative constantly pushes you to evaluate your own morality.
It raises some really tough questions for the reader, like how far would you go to protect the people you love when the world literally tears itself apart?
Would you sacrifice your own humanity to fuel a machine that keeps your city safe?
If you want a book that respects your intelligence, offers multiple character perspectives, and is packed with genuine aha moments regarding the world's lore, this is it.
It totally delivers on both the visceral thrills and the heavy thematic questions. So, to wrap up our deep dive into this incredible source material, Chapter 24, No Way Out, serves as a terrifying microcosm of the entire novel.
It really is the perfect cross-section of what makes the book great.
D.P. Kirk grounds epic, world-ending fantasy in intimate, claustrophobic human terror. You get the sweeping lore of a collapsing civilization, but you feel it entirely within the confines of a locked security cage, listening to the tumblers of a lock refuse to turn.
And, you know, the true power of the shared memory narrative device is that it demands empathy. It doesn't just tell you that characters suffered. It forces your nervous system to simulate their survival.
And that concept of shared memory is the thought I want to leave you with today.
Yeah.
In this world, characters have the ability to literally, physically, feel the darkest, most traumatic moments of their loved ones' past.
It's a heavy burden.
Think about that locked security cage in the department store.
Yeah.
If you had the ability to plug your mind into the exact terrifying memories of someone you deeply care about, to feel their heart seize, to smell the air they breathed, and to understand the exact foundational trauma that made them who they are today, would you do it?
That is a tough question.
Would you willingly endure their nightmares to understand them better? Or are some doors, much like the one keeping the infected out of that department store cage, better left locked?
Thank you for joining us as we unpacked the dark, fascinating mechanics of San Vitae.
We hope you take the plunge and explore the wastes for yourself. Until next time, keep reading and keep diving deep.